Hey everybody, in this video I want to share some tips and tricks to help everybody build some basic cabinets just like this. Hey everybody, what's going on? Jason with Fence Woodworking. Welcome back. After a bunch of messages and a bunch of questions asking me stuff about cabinet related things, because I have done other videos that talk about cabinets or things related to cabinets, such as installing hinges or making shaker style cabinet doors, but I don't have a video talking about a cabinet itself. So because of that, what I'm going to do today is go ahead and give you some very basic cabinet construction tips. Before we get into that though, if you are not subscribed to me, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now. I do bi-weekly videos on different tips and tricks, all in an effort to make you a better woodworker. And then if you're not following me on Instagram, go check me out there at Ben's Woodworking. You'll get to see what I'm doing on a daily basis, and I'm very active, and that's really the best place to get a hold of me if you have any questions. Probably the first thing you're gonna build a cabinet for is your shop, whether it's the base of an assembly table, an outfeed table, a drill press, a bandsaw, whatever it is you're building a cabinet, more than likely it's going to be a base style cabinet, not one that you necessarily would hang on the wall. And because of that, that's what I'm going to focus on today, because if you start with small projects in your shop and you just want to mess around, there's nothing better than to practice certain techniques than things in your shop, much like applying stain, polyurethane, whatever. Great opportunity for you to practice those techniques. So I'm going to talk to you about cabinets today. Hopefully it'll help you out making some shop projects and or just building cabinets in general. I'm going to focus on the overall assembly of a base cabinet and some of the characteristics, but I'm also going to talk about some of the characteristics that you'll find in upper cabinets and just give you an idea, because cabinets can go so many different ways. I just want you to have the most information possible, and I'll really try to explain each one of the aspects of the cabinet. That way, when you go start building them, you'll know what the different options are. So before we get started, the cabinet that I'm building today is not any particular size. It's just a small cabinet, just to kind of show you the ideas. And because of that, I've gone ahead and made a diagram of some common things that you're going to find when it comes to cabinets. And really, the majority of the things that we're going to talk about today, with the exception of one thing, and that's the shelf pin holes. So as you can see, I've drawn here, I've labeled a few different things. So some of the things we're going to talk about is the common things that I put in my cabinet. So the most basic cabinet construction, those things are going to be this base shelf, the toe kick if it is a floor cabinet, the cross braces that you see here at the top, as well as in the back. The shelf pins, unless I'm putting adjustable shelves in, I'm not putting them. Just wanted to put them on there to give you the idea of, hey, you know, you can put shelf pins in any of these cabinets. They're very, very easy to do, but we will not be talking about those today. And then I have my groove for the backing panel. And so here's the one thing. If this is a base cabinet, I'm probably not necessarily going to put a back panel in it. However, we will talk about that today, just so you can kind of see the techniques that I use when I'm putting in that panel and why I place some of the other things where I do. The materials that I'll be using for this cabinet demonstration is all 3/4 inch plywood, with the exception of the back panel, which we will go over today, which will be 1/4 inch MDF. Right here I have my two side pieces. This right here will act as the bottom permanent shelf. This piece here is going to be the MDF backing for this cabinet. And these three pieces here will serve as the cross braces for this cabinet. So when I'm making my cabinets, the first thing that I like to do personally, obviously after cutting all the pieces to size, is I like to do the 3/4 inch dado to accept the permanent shelf for the base. For this video, I'm going to show you doing it with a dado stack. However, just keep in mind, you can do this with just your standard blade if you don't have a dado stack, or you could also do it with a router and maybe a straight edge to ensure you get a straight line. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut these dados. So what I want to make sure is that the bottom of this dado, this being the bottom of the cabinet, is 3 inches away from the fence. So there's 3 inches of space from the blade here to the fence, and that will start my dado 3 inches up. Before I make these cuts, I want to point out I do have my blade raised 1/4 of an inch or roughly 6 millimeters because I want to have it go in 1/3 of the depth on this piece of wood. That isn't necessarily any absolute must height. It's just the height that I like to use when doing dados. Okay, so as you see here, I've got my 1/4 inch in depth dado, roughly 3/4 of an inch wide. Obviously it's not quite 3/4 of an inch because we know that plywood is not exactly 3/4 of an inch. So the next thing that I'm gonna do, since I have the dado stack in, and again, you don't need the dado stack, it just makes things a little faster. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cut this panel slot here, and all I'm gonna have to do that is take out my middle chippers and use my 2 blades. It'll give me 1/4 of an inch, and I'm gonna slide that panel right in the back. All I did was take out the chippers on the dado stack. I did not adjust the height at all, so there's no reason to change that. And then the thing that I wanna make sure is that the distance from the back of my panel to the edge of the board is the exact width of a piece of plywood. So an easy way to figure that out, and just for quick reference, is I place that piece of wood in between the fence and the blade, and now I know that my groove will be cut exactly the thickness of this piece, which is important, and I'll explain here in a little bit. So I'm bringing my boards back over to the table. Everything's good, right? Well, wrong. And I made a cut a certain way because I wanted to show you guys what has happened to me way more often than it hasn't happened to me when I first started making cabinets. Now, if you look at these 2 boards, I've got my grooves for the back panel cut. I've got my grooves for the 3/4 inch permanent shelf cut. But what's the problem? The problem is that they're both exactly the same. And this happened to me so many times. So I wanted to show you guys this because it's also going to come into play when we get down to our toe kicks. What I had done so many times in the past is I had looked at this piece here, tried to mirror that along other pieces. But what would happen if I cut my toe kick here and I cut my toe kick here? Well, if I stood these boards up, the toe kick would be one in the back, one in the front. Same thing applies to this groove here. So if I put my boards together and I raise this up, I don't have any groove here to accept the back panel. I can't turn this board because I could have a groove to accept the back panel, but now the groove to accept the bottom shelf is at the top. So what can you do at the table saw to make sure that you don't make this mistake like I have so many times when I first started building these cabinets? When you run this through, I have my groove close to the fence. I run it through. My 3/4 inch acceptance groove for the bottom cabinet is closest to me. I run that through. I flip it over. I'm good to go. Now, the next piece that I do, it has to be the opposite. So what I'm gonna do when I recut this is I'm going to place this away from me. I'm cutting the groove closest to the fence. I push this through. It's then now going to provide a groove on this side. So when I turn this up, they match up perfectly. So the reason I wanted to show you guys that is because, like I said earlier, it's happened to me a whole bunch. And the one job that it really kind of hurt or stung a little bit was when I was making multiple cabinets. I had all of my pieces cut. Everything was ready until it was time to assemble. And as you can imagine, everything was exactly the same. So basically half of my sides had to be redone. My biggest recommendation is to make sure you lay out all the lines so you know exactly where they need to be cut beforehand. Once you've done that a few times, you'll get the hang of it, and then you probably won't necessarily need to do it anymore. But it's always a really good idea, and you can use anything, a pen, a pencil, a Sharpie, whatever it is. as long as if it's going to be painted, it doesn't matter what you use. If it's going to be stained, then obviously you have to be a little bit more careful about what you use to mark it. Okay, so now I've got all the grooves cut properly. I went ahead and patched this so it doesn't confuse anybody for the rest of the video. But now you'll notice that I have my groove for the back panel on opposing sides. And now the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and cut out these toe kick areas. My preferred technique for cutting out the toe kicks is a bandsaw. However, you could use a jigsaw just as easily. The next thing that I'm going to do is ensure that my cross braces are ready. And the joinery method that I am going to use almost all the time when it's doing cabinets and my cross braces is pocket holes. So we've gotten to the point where we can go ahead and start assembling our cabinet. Now, what I always like to do is I like to attach my cross braces first. And the reason I like to do that is because when it comes time for me to slide in my piece here for my shelf, I have something else that it's resting on. So when I put my other side on, it's resting on it nice and firm, as opposed to trying to balance it on this and then put in my cross braces and everything else. So these will be permanent, and this is a little bit more movable. Anytime you're going to put in pocket holes, I always make sure that I put the pocket holes so they're facing upward in this scenario, because I want the screws to go in this way and bite more into the wood like this, as opposed to if I did it this way, my screw is going to be literally like right underneath these edge plies. Does not make as strong of a joint. So you always want to try to go back into the wood as much as possible. Now, another extremely handy device if you're using pocket holes, if you don't have one, is these clamps that they make where the one tip actually goes into the hole drilled by the pocket hole machine, and then this will go flat on the bottom. What this really does is does a great job of making sure that this piece of wood does not move at all when you're going to drill. And if you're familiar at all with pocket holes, you know that they have a tendency to want to move on you as you start to drill them into your board. So now will be a little bit better illustration of what I was talking about earlier in terms of now having the support for the other side. So now that I've got this side ready, I'm going to go ahead and place some glue down in my dado where my shelf, bottom permanent shelf, is going to go. Now, when I cut this, I only cut this to where it would go to the edge of the panel you see here, obviously, because the panel is going to go all the way down. This is not going to go all the way through. I'm going to add a little bit of glue along my cross braces, my shelf. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place my other half, my other side on top. And here I'm actually going to use a pin nailer to hold the bottom shelf in place until I'm able to secure the other end. You can also use it on here because it does help just keep things a little more in place as you're going to put your pocket screws in. I like to use a pin nailer because a pin nailer, obviously, you're making very, very small holes that are easily concealable. But I've got my cabinet nice and sturdy. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to flip it over to the other side because I at least want to get a couple of pin nails in my shelf as well until I am able to get it clamped up just to hold my shelf in place. Okay, so here's what we have. I've got my cross brace on the top front and the top back. I've got my back cross brace. I still need to add my back panel Here, I've got my toe kick cut out. It came out very nice. I'll show you a profile from the side. That's what it looks like from the side. So now the last thing I have left to do is to go ahead and place that panel in the back. So now I've got the panel in. Something I like to do every once in a while, if I think it's necessary, if it's a loose fit, is you can take it, throw a pin nail here, throw a pin nail here, and then put a couple down where your dado is, because that's where you know your shelf is, and it's gonna hold that panel in place nice and tight. Okay, so here's a small mini cabinet. Now, there are a few things that I did skip for the interest of time, but I wanted to take an opportunity to talk about those now. And one of those things is going in and clamping it up. So you saw me using pin nails to get stuff in place. That's fine, and a pin nailer is great. One of the reasons I use a pin nailer is to hold it steady until I can get clamps on it. But for the purpose of this video, we will not use clamps. However, obviously when you clamp it up, something that's really, really helpful, if you do have those 90-degree corner braces that you can basically clamp and ensure everything is 90 degrees, those are excellent when it comes to cabinets. Reason being is because having everything 90 degrees, a perfect 90 degrees in cabinets is super, super important. It just makes everything a lot easier, such as the doors, drawer slides, things like that. Some other things we talked about earlier, obviously you could go ahead and you could do shelf pins if you decided if this was the style of cabinet that required shelf pins. If this was an upper cabinet, obviously you probably wouldn't have these upper braces. Instead, you would either have an MDF top or a 3/4 inch plywood top or whatever material you're making out of it. And then you'd probably have some sort of crown molding at the top as well. Another option you have, obviously, with cabinets is a face frame. So if you were going to decide to put a door on here, a simple face frame to put around the edges and then install your door and hinges. Again, these are all just multiple different things that you can do with cabinets. I just want you guys to kind of see some of the basics and some of the most common things when it comes to cabinets. One other thing I wanted to point out is down here at the bottom, you see the toe kick and it's open. Now you don't have to have a toe kick at all in the first place. You could just have this run straight down to the ground and then you make your face frame a little bit longer down on the bottom and then it would just basically cover it. However, if you do have a toe kick, it's simple. You can just take a piece of wood, a piece of plywood if you want. If the sides are going to be covered, I've just cut this piece down to match the size and I slide that underneath there and it looks really clean, really nice. But when it comes to making cabinets, that's really all there is to it. The first cabinets that I had to make were for things for my shop. It was a very, very good learning experience and it's a really good way to get your feet wet on the very, very basic elements of making cabinets. If you have any questions at all over anything that we covered in this video or about any of the tools that I used or anything, please leave them down in the comments section below. I will also leave links to any of the tools that I did use in this video down in the description if you want to go get any more information about them or if you choose to purchase one of those items. Again, if you're not following me on Instagram, I strongly encourage you to go over to Instagram, follow me there at Bent's Woodworking. I'm way more active on Instagram than I am in the YouTube side. You'll get to follow what I'm doing on a daily basis. I post stories regularly and I post pictures and videos and tips every single day, all in an effort to help you out and make you a better woodworker. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed this video. I hope to see everybody at the next video. Until then, get back in the shop and keep building.